Welcome to Faith and Science. I'm Dr. John Ashton. As I was going for my walk this morning, I just somehow my thoughts went on to a radio program that I heard many years ago, and it was in relation to one of Australia's most popular Prime Ministers, Bob Hawke. He was an Australian Prime Minister for quite a number of years. And on this program, they were interviewing his mother, and his mother had been a devout Christian, and she commented that when Bob was born in hospital, when her little baby boy was born in hospital, she was reading her Bible and God gave her a text. This text came to mind that the government will rest on his shoulders. And as a praying mother and a devoted mother, she held on to that promise. And of course, many years later, Bob Hawke was elected Australian Prime Minister. Perhaps one of the sad things is, of course, that the Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, probably certainly wasn't, we would see, openly a Christian person. Matter of fact, he's probably an agnostic. And it reminded me that today there are many young people that have grown up in Christian homes where their parents prayed for them, but they went to university, got involved in higher education, and just threw away their childhood beliefs and knowledge of God. And perhaps they were convinced that, the Bible was just a series of myths. It was, just their stories for children, just had some good stories. And it alarms me that as, I talk to parents today that the same thing that perhaps happened for Bob Hawke's mum, who was a really strong Christian, very devoted Christian, and read her Bible and claimed the promises of God and obviously prayed for her son, that people still make these choices to move away from God and live very secular lifestyles. And I think this is a shame because we now have such overwhelming evidence for the existence of God, that God is very real. The other thing is too that is commonly talked about perhaps in literature and some of the debates on television programs is this sort of idea that comes across that science has now disproved God. Again, a few years ago now, there was quite a bit of a debate in the Australian education system about the possibility of teaching intelligent design. And one of the professors of biology at the University of New South Wales went on to say, well, look, if we taught intelligent design, we'd have to teach spoon bending and alien abductions and astrology and flat earth theory and all these other crazy things. So in other words, they were linking all these crazy ideas with the theory of evolution, which is the Bible. In other words, this paints this implication that the Bible itself and the miracles and so forth in the account of creation in the Bible are of similar things. They're not scientific. They're just in the same category as sort of fairy tales or science fiction. But this is very, very far from the truth. But unfortunately, it's still being propagated. There's in the United States, we have Bill Nye, a popular television presenter, again, who has written books challenging creation, evolution, and saying that it's undeniable that evolution has occurred, that this is how we have evolved here. But when I look at some of these arguments that are presented often by the people that want to oppose the teachings of the Bible, they are simply assertions. And this morning I was also thinking too, as I walked along, as I remembered studying applied mathematics and physics at university, that some of these great scientists and physicists that we learned about then, they were Christians. They were really, really strong Christians. I remember in Applied Maths 2, one of our textbooks was Electricity by C.A. Coulson. Of course, C.A. Coulson was Professor of Mathematics at either Cambridge or Oxford, I can't remember which one, but one of those top universities there, a brilliant mathematician, C.A. Coulson, and a very, very strong Christian. And he wrote books. I think Science and Fundamental Christian Beliefs were one of his books by C.A. Coulson, another brilliant mathematician. And it's interesting, his textbook was used as the third-year physics curriculum, part of the third-year curriculum, physics curriculum on electricity to electromagnetism. And of course that led me then to read, when I became a Christian, was becoming a Christian, started to go to church, started to read the Bible, and I was challenged by some of the church members that, as a scientist, and at the time I was reading for a doctorate in science in the area of chemistry actually, and the people were saying, look, you're a scientist, what do you think about evolution? And I was looking around for books written by other scientists that supported creation. And one of the books that I was given was, I think it was 12 or I can't remember exactly how many scientists, why they believe in creation. And one of those scientists was Wernher von Braun. Now, I guess many young people today wouldn't know about Wernher von Braun. He was a German physicist. He was born back in 1912, but he died in 1977, so he certainly was alive during my lifetime. And he was the scientist who, in Germany, led the team that developed the rockets. And he was very interested in space travel. And he was one of the scientists that was working on the development of rockets for space travel in Germany. Now, of course, they were commandeered to develop rockets for military use, and von Braun was opposed to this. He was in charge of the program. Professor von Braun, he had 80 scientists and technicians working at their rocket testing sites at Peenemünde in the northwest of Germany. And they developed all the early technology that was related to rocket propulsion, aerodynamics, and rocket guided systems were developed by the team that von Braun led. But von Braun was not in favour of them using the rockets to fire on civilian targets. And of course, what was happening was the technology that they were developing was being used to develop not only anti-aircraft missiles but long-range ballistic missiles. And von Braun was not very happy with that. So the German secret police, of course it was led by Heinrich Himmler, they tried to take over the rocket program, and they began using the technology and knowledge that had been developed by von Braun and his team. They began sending thousands of rockets across into England in 1944. But von Braun refused to cooperate with Himmler, and he was jailed together with two of his top other scientists in 1944. And they were charged with not supporting the program because von Braun's real interest was space exploration. However, he was personally released from jail by Adolf Hitler, who realised that the development of the rockets would come to a standstill if he wasn't heading up the research. And just as the war was nearly ending, von Braun again moved his rocket team away from where they were up in the northwest of Germany to a different area so that they could surrender to the Americans rather than to the Russians. And so they surrendered to the Americans and were taken to the United States. And he was a keen proponent of of space exploration, and really was behind the American space exploration program. He was given the go-ahead to develop the Jupiter rocket for space travel, and of course von Braun launched the American satellite Explorer 1 in 1958, and later went on to develop the rockets that took the first American astronaut into space, and also the first manned in late 1968 the Apollo 8 spacecraft. And it was von Braun who masterminded the idea of the moon landing missions, a spacecraft in 3 sections. Only one section actually landed on the moon. The other section orbited the moon with life support systems, power and fuel to transport the astronauts back to Earth. So he was an absolutely brilliant scientist. And he was often criticised for developing technology that, of course, has been used in war, like the ballistic missiles and this sort of thing. But he is quoted as saying, "The drug which cures when taken in small doses may kill when taken in excess. The knife in the hands of a skillful surgeon may save a life, but it will kill when thrust just a few inches deeper. Thus it does not make sense to ask a scientist whether his drug or knife is good or bad for mankind." And I guess this is a quandary that is faced by many scientists, that they develop research, but of course people can adapt that research for bad purposes. Von Braun, and as I said, I remember reading this book. He was a very strong creationist, and he wrote in this book, his testimony and why he believed in creation. He was a practicing Lutheran. He was very active in the Lutheran Church in his Christian life, and he has quoted that the Bible was a revelation of God's nature and love. And he spoke about his dependence on God in prayer, not only in times of crisis, just during his escape from Nazi Germany, but also in his work, such as praying for the safety of the manned flights. And one of the very interesting things is that von Braun, and here, when you think all our space travel and this sort of thing essentially is based on the work that Wernher von Braun did, and he strongly opposed the philosophy of scientific rationalism. Now, scientific rationalism is the idea that man has it's just man's ability to know and understand solely by means of scientific investigation and human reasoning. So this is scientific rationalism. Now, this essentially underpins all our scientific research today, and that's why they don't allow God to be taught in the classroom. But he stated that scientific concepts exist in the mind of men, and behind these concepts lies the reality which is being revealed to us, but only by the grace of God. And so that's actually a quote from von Braun that was published in McGraw-Hill Encyclopedia of World Biography. So I'll read that again. The scientific concepts exist only in the minds of men. Behind these concepts lies the reality, which is being revealed to us, but only by the grace of God. It was interesting too, and one of the things that von Braun opposed was evolutionary thinking. And he wrote, "There are those who argue that the universe evolved out of a random process. But what random process could produce the brain of man or the system of the human eye?" And that was in a letter read to the California State Board of Education in September 1972. So von Braun was a witness there, and as people were trying to stand up and have creation continued to be taught in schools, Wernher von Braun was a witness for creation there, and that's what he wrote. "There are those who argue that the universe evolved out of random processes, but what random process could produce the brain of man or the system of the human eye?" He believed that scientific advances increasingly provided evidence of intelligent design. Another time he wrote, "I find it difficult to understand a scientist who does not acknowledge the presence of a superior rationality behind the existence of the universe." And so remember, this is a guide that led to much of the ability of how to explore the universe physically with our rockets and spacecraft that have been able to take our telescopes and so forth, such as the Hubble telescope, deep out into space. Von Braun was a very strong critic of the modern tendency to teach science from an evolutionary standpoint without examining the creationist alternative as well. He believed that such an approach was totally unscientific. Once he wrote this, "To be forced to believe only one conclusion, that is that everything in the universe happened by chance, would violate the very objectivity of science itself." So, and this is a very important point, that if you close down and censor the teacher of creation, in actual fact, we are violating the very objectivity of science itself. And we need to realise that this is one of the characteristics of our science education today and our scientific research publication. We have closed down any scientists who are publishing or teaching the evidence and the overwhelming evidence that we have now that we have a creator God that created this universe, a self-existent creator God, that the universe and living systems cannot evolve by chance. They cannot form by chance mechanisms. He also believed that the reason for the amazing string of successes that they had, the Americans with their Apollo flights to the moon, was that we tried to never overlook anything. And this is also a quote from von Braun's letter that was read. He said, "We tried to never overlook anything. It is in the same sense of scientific honesty that I endorse the presentations of alternative theories for the origin of the universe, life, and man in the science classroom. It would be an error to overlook the possibility that the universe was planned rather than happened by chance." So another time he said, "Man's spaceflight is an amazing achievement, but it has opened for mankind thus far only a tiny door for viewing the awesome reaches of space. An outlook through this peephole at the vast mysteries of the universe should only confirm our belief in the certainty of its creator." So I think there we have, that's another quote again from von Braun that wrote that. I think as we consider the scientists like von Braun It's, I think educationists today should really take note and realise it's a massive mistake to eliminate the teaching of creation from our education system today. But like I said, how many students today learn about Wernher von Braun? And how many students today would learn that he was such a strong creationist? When I was doing physics, and in 1966, I think it would have been, I was doing physics 2, second year physics at university with applied mathematics. And that particular year was the last year that valve theory was taught in physics, because they're all changing over to solid-state semiconductor theory. And again, I guess now, because valve theory probably isn't taught, we only perhaps very briefly a very lecture from a historical. And when I'm talking about here in terms of valve, I'm not talking about water valves or pressure valves. I'm talking about electrical valves, such as were used in radios and in rectifiers and most of the electronic equipment up until the 1970s was valve-based. And prior to that, of course, semiconductors were around, developed in the late 50s. But the valve theory, valves, of course, were used in radios, televisions, all these sort of things up till that time. And, of course, the person who was one of the pioneers of the thermionic valve and that pioneered electronics was Sir Ambrose Fleming. And one of the things that he was a brilliant physicist. He was born in 1849 in Lancaster, England, and he, of course, studied at the University of London, and he went on to become Professor of Mathematics and Physics at the University College of Nottingham. And then later, he joined the Edison Electric Light Company and became advisor to the Edison Telephone Company. And one of the things was he studied at Cambridge, of course, under James Clerk Maxwell, another brilliant scientist who was a creationist I must talk about again sometime in more detail. Fleming became the first Professor of Electrical Engineering at the University College London, and that was in 1885. And he held this position till 1926. He was also a consultant to the Marconi Wireless and Telegraph Company for 26 years. And his most famous and probably most useful component that Fleming invented was the thermionic valve, also known as the vacuum diode. He also developed the thermionic tube, the thermionic rectifier, and the Fleming valve. Or actually, these are similar names for the same sort of thing, actually. And, of course, this led on to so many other developments. But what people, and he won many awards from the Royal Society, the Albert Medal, for the Royal Society of Arts in 1921, the Faraday Medal for the Institute of Electrical Engineers in 1928, and so forth. But what people don't realise is that throughout his scientific career, Fleming devoted much time and energy to strongly oppose the theory of evolution. He wrote at least one major textbook against evolution, and he was the founder and first president of the evolution protest movement. And that was, he wrote a book in 1934 and was on memories of a scientific life. And this movement, the evolution protest movement, was formed in Britain by scientists who were concerned that evolution propaganda does not present facts impartially. It dwells upon those which favour the theory while suppressing those which oppose it. Such are not the methods of true, but of false science. And I think this is interesting in that really supports the same thoughts that Wernher von Braun had, that if we suppress the teaching of creation, we're not really being honest to science. This is a major problem here. And also, Fleming was acutely aware that the impact of the debate over evolution affected more than the scientific community. The widespread and the growing acceptance of evolution by the general public had led to a significant shift in community attitudes on moral issues. In the foreword of his book, The Origin of Mankind, viewed from the standpoint of revelation and research, that was his book, Fleming wrote, "Whatever may be the effect on the religious opinions of adults or scientific men of an adherence to this evolutionary theory of human origins, it is unquestionable that it is disastrous to the ethical development or spiritual life of the young or uneducated to lead them to believe that men are descended from monkeys, or that the chimpanzee or the gorilla are man's nearest relatives." So there we see that great scientist that wrote there. He also wrote this: "There is abundant evidence that the Bible, though written by men, is not the product of the human mind, but countless multitudes it has always been revered. By countless multitudes it has always been revered as a communication to us from the Creator of the universe." I think if we think of these great men, and Sir Ambrose Fleming and Professor Wernher von Braun, these men that changed and led to the major developments that we have today in communication, space travel and so forth. They were such strong creations, and they saw the errors in teaching creation to our young people. I think this is a very strong message today that needs to get out there. And these men who believed in God and made God and believed in the Bible, that the Bible was the communication from God to man, they were so successful, and they saw the benefits that the Bible had for humankind. I think this is just so true today. There is so much need for us all to be reading the Bible and connecting ourselves with God. You've been listening to Faith and Science. Remember, these programs can be re-listened to by Googling 3ABN Australia, or one word, .org.au. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Have a great day.
You've been listening to a production of 3ABN Australia Radio.